Good evening, Dominica, the Caribbean, the rest of the world. And this is the official launch of Dr. Thompson Fontaine's book, The Maroons of Dominica, from 1764 to 1810. We are elated. We are so happy that you're joining us today for this monumental occasion, the launch of Dr. Thompson Fontaine's book, The Maroons of Dominica. As you know, he's in Dominica, so we encourage everyone to come on in. As you're coming in, don't forget to share the live. We're streaming on several platforms, and we have quite a program for you this evening. So we want to welcome everyone who is joining us, and we want to encourage you to share the live. This evening, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Sam George, over at TDN Network, which comprises TDN TV, as well as TDN Radio. Sam, how are you? How are you feeling about tonight's event?
It's quite exciting. Just about a year ago, you and I and some of the guests who are on here are going to be on here tonight. We kind of did this. And so let me say good evening to our viewers and our listeners over at tdnradio.net, and as well those of you who normally listen to This Week in Interview on RVR Jams, Channel 59 on DigiPlay in Dominica. Welcome. This is a special event, so there will be no This Week in Interview tonight. But however, I'm sure that you guys are going to enjoy tonight's program.
Yes, so thank you for that. Thank you for being the co-host. And as we can see, the crowd is quickly coming in. The front row people are definitely on board this evening. You know, we have a front row crew. They're always the first to join us, and we're so grateful for them. So we see Glenda Shillingford. Good evening, Glenda. Great to see you. Tazi Didier, Dan Fontaine, Havis Badwell, great to see you. Sandra Norris, Charlene Sordane Williams. So quite an audience has already joined us, and we encourage them to share the live, let everyone know that we are here for this very important presentation. And I hope you've already gotten your copy of the book. I know both Sam and I got our copies way back in April of 2021. I've read mine cover to cover, and I have since passed it on to my mom, who's now reading it. So if you have not yet gotten your copy, there is a link in this video, whether you're watching via YouTube or Facebook. There is a link that you can simply click on. It will take you to Amazon, where you might purchase either the physical copy of the book, or you can also get the e-copy of the book. So again, it is great to be here with you for this very important presentation, the official launch of the Maroons of Dominica by Dr. Thompson Fontaine. And I want to go ahead and bring in Dr. Fontaine. I see he is MIA. Dr. Fontaine, are you somewhere back there? So we can hand the program over to you, so we can begin with a word of prayer. And I believe there's a young lady who's interested in doing a poem. So Dr. Fontaine, please show yourself.
Good night to all of you. It's good.
Yes, we can see you.
We can't see you.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. It's a really great occasion, and I'm very happy all of you made the time to be here tonight. Before we go any further, we're going to ask somebody to, Errol is going to lead us in the word of prayer.
Thompson, you may want to change the camera. We can't see the person who's speaking, neither you.
Good evening, all. Let us all stand as we go to God in prayer. Let us pray. O eternal and heavenly Father, as we bow before your presence at this time, we thank thee for blessing us with another day and giving us this opportunity where we can be gathered as like-minded people to celebrate the launching of Dr. Fontaine's book. We thank thee for the written word. And Father, we know it is often said that a people without a knowledge of the history are like a tree without roots. And so, Father, we thank thee that Dr. Thompson has taken the time and have put together through research and documented evidence the history of our ancestors. And we pray that as we read this book and as we bring it into life, that we too will invoke the spirit of our ancestors to stand up for what is right, what is just, and to believe in truth and righteousness. We pray that you bless these proceedings, that all who will be listening and all who are present will be blessed by the opportunity of having known that there is a book written about our people that we can all cherish and be proud of ourselves as a people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you very much, Errol. At this time, I'm going to invite Mrs. Germania Collier Didier. She's written a very exciting poem about just this topic tonight. So let me ask her to come forward.
A pleasant good evening to all. Dr. Thompson is my friend as well as my schoolmate, and tonight I celebrate you, Thompson, on the launching of your book. I wrote a poem along the lines of Thompson's book, and in my poem, you'll get a synopsis already of what the book is all about. My poem is entitled Resisting Slavery, Freedom, the Ultimate Dream. Why slavery? Why the black skin? For plantations in the New World, survival was key. Forced labor was the answer, and Africans' children it would be. 400 years of the slave trade. What a story to be told. From Africa to the Americas, they carried their human gold. Our ancestors came, bound hand and feet, as sardines in the hold, then made to stand in squares and markets as products to be sold. How degrading, how inhuman. What did these Europeans think? Why was this necessary? Could they have been hoodwinked? But once sold and settled in, many slaves had other dreams. Slavery was there to oppress them, but they cunningly drew up escape schemes. To the Americas and the Caribbean, now destined to be their home, they chose to be human in an inhumane system. Slaves in colonial Dominica soon realized something. The topography was to their advantage. They began to imagine. Man was made to live in freedom. Resisting slavery became the key. They decided to take the bull by the horn, knowing there would be no justice without equality, no equality without freedom. Resistance came in different packages, depending on the opportunity. Some ran away and became Maroons, called Negmawa in Whitey Kubuli. There was murder of plantation owners. There was burning of homes. Some succeeded in feigning illness. Others operated under the work slow syndrome. For some, resistance meant paying the ultimate price. Like Sojourner Ruth and her Underground Railroad, secret networks were organized. Maroons escaped from other isles, and in Dominica, plans were strategized. Rebellions and revolutions became part of the game. In Guadeloupe, Martinique, and Haiti, the planters felt some strain. The Black Caribs in St. Vincent, Maroons in Suriname, Black slaves in Jamaica, all stood their ground. Unable to keep them, lived by many tears. These maroons took a pivotal role. The fight for freedom yet perhaps many lived in the Yet voices were added to the tent of the slave. The result was positive. The road to freedom. Emancipation lies there in 1846. Nobody trying to
though having fought violent paid the ultimate price for resisting slavery.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right.
Yes, so if you're joining us on the Facebook Live, we're just working out all the details. Thompson, I don't think we can hear you at this point. And Sam, I think you're muted, so I hope that...
Yeah, sorry,
okay.
Simon. We
That's
seem to be
okay.
having some audio issues, Thompson. Not sure what's going on right now.
Yes, so guys, just thank you for your patience. Everyone who's on the Facebook Live, YouTube Live, listening to us right now. We want to thank you for being here again. In the meantime, you can go ahead and get your copy of the book while we work out the technical difficulties in Dominica. So I think what we should do, Sam, while we're working out the technical difficulties, is we have quite a panel with us today. So I think we should go ahead and call on one of our panel members. Dr. Irving Andre is here with us. So I think we can go ahead and call on him to say a couple of words regarding the launch of this very important book. So Thompson, we'll get right back to you. Let's call on Dr. Irving Andre to say a few words.
Definitely.
All right. Good evening to the panel and good evening to those who've attended at this venue tonight to hear the Thompson launch his book. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
You are gathered, and all praises to those who are here physically and those who are here via Facebook and TDN. You are gathered here not for free servings of pilau, but you are here to redeem. You're here to reinforce your convictions. You are here to be reinvigorated. You are here to strengthen your resolve against the reprisals that unfortunately is the fate of those who stand up for freedom. You are here to perhaps sing Bob Marley's redemption song. And how appropriate is it that you are here tonight? Because tonight we're talking about a book on the Maroons of Dominica, resistance and rebellion. To place this book in a historical perspective, over the last 50 years, the main interpretation of the history of slavery in the West Indies is that slaves were freed because of the inherent goodness of the British soul. Another interpretation was that the planters were not as callous as they were portrayed. Since then, and starting perhaps as early as 1928, there was a book by a historian which says that slavery became unprofitable. That was echoed by Eric Williams in his 1944 book, Capitalism and Slavery. But even after these texts, a number of historians have sought to rebuff Dr. Williams's thesis that slavery was abolished because it was unprofitable. But even while they tried to rebuff that thesis, they showed that slavery remained profitable until 1833. And this is what we have to deal with, the significant prosperity engendered by slavery. And second, the fact that the West Indians, the slaves, their actions were often overlooked. And it is within that context that we have to assess Thompson's very important book. It placed in its central focus the actions of the slaves themselves to free themselves. And it sends us a message that those of us who don't want to play our role in freeing ourselves, we do so at our detriment. Dr. Fontaine highlights a number of incidents. He talks about the 1813 edict of Governor Ainslie, who declared that if slaves Maroons don't surrender, every man, woman, and child would be put to death without any exception. And in fact, in 1837, two British stipendiary magistrates visited Dominica, and they looked at that well in the old market, and they said that even as late as 1837, no one used that well because slaves were butchered in the old market, and that people refused to use it because of the shedding of innocent blood at that location. So here we are today, the descendants of these slaves, and Thompson's book talks about, as a subtitle, resistance and rebellion. It could have well gone on to say resistance, rebellion, reprisals, and redemption. And isn't that what we have to deal with today? Resistance, rebellion, reprisals. Thompson summoned me to be at this function tonight, and I gladly accepted because my freedom was not engaged. Some of you may have been summoned because you chose to exercise your freedom to walk without any justification in the streets of Roseau. But that is not the journey. The journey is not the walk itself. The journey is the process whereby you or everyone is treated equally without regard, not just to color or complexion, but without regard to political affiliation. So Thompson's book, and I only have 1 more minute. Thompson gave me 4 minutes because I told him I charge by the minute. So I only have 1 left. So Thompson's book speaks to us in a very eloquent fashion, haunting us on a daily basis. And that is why it's so important that everyone obtain a copy of this important book, because it is an integral and important part of Dominica's history. Thank you very much. Just 4 seconds, above 4 minutes. So Thompson, the check will not be too big.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. And let's go back to Dr. Fontaine and see if the audio has been worked out. If not, we will take another one of our panel members. Dr. Fontaine, over to you.
Looks like
you hear me, right?
Issues.
Thank you. Sorry, we tested everything earlier today. It worked perfectly. We tested for over an hour, and tonight stuff happens. So please, very fast. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Andre. Appreciate those words, and I think now you can hear us. So
it's too low.
It's low. Okay. We'll continue trying to fix it. So why don't you continue with the other?
Yes. We will do so. Thank you, Dr. Fontaine. Continue working on it. So again, we have quite a panel of guests here with us. But before we do, we always want to acknowledge everyone who's joining us via Facebook. So we want to say good evening. Glenda, thank you for sharing and reaching out to other folks to join the Facebook. Ernest Leighton, I got a signed copy. The price is right. $30. Thank you for that, Ernest. Annette Phillip watching. Congrats, Dr. Fontaine. Let's see who else we have. Niambi, great to see you. Marilyn Pascal, congratulations to Dr. Thompson Fontaine. Cannot attend as planned due to slight illness. I am online viewing from my home. I am almost done reading it. A must read. We must know our history. So thank you for that, Marilyn. And we will continue to take your comments, so keep them coming. So now we want to go over to Mr. Gabriel Christian, attorney at law, for some comments. So thank you for that, Marilyn. And we will continue to take your comments, so keep them coming. So now we want to go over to Mr. Gabriel Christian, attorney at law, for some comments. So thank you for that, Marilyn. And we will continue to take your comments, so keep them coming. So now we want to go.
A blessed good evening to you, Dr. Simone Matthew. Can you hear me? Good. A blessed good evening to you, Dr. Fontaine, to Mr. George, to the audience gathered at the Public Service Training Center, and to all those online. Tonight is a very important night in Dominican history. It's a very important night because it's the first time that a Dominican of African descent has dedicated himself to the scholarship necessary to speak truth to power and to render in the written word the history of our enslaved African ancestors who fought for the freedoms we enjoy today. It is also a very important time in our history because just a week or so ago, Dr. Fontaine was arrested by a police service that has now been deformed in great part into an agency of a one-party state culture led by Roosevelt Skerritt. I make no bones that to say that this is actually ironic that the first Dominican of African descent to dedicate himself to his history of African liberation struggle himself is facing a struggle where he is under false indictment, false charges, simply for speaking out for democracy, honesty, and justice. The irony cannot be lost on all of us that the only other two persons to have written about the African liberation struggle are two persons of European descent. One, Dominican-born, I believe, Lennox Honeychurch, who wrote about the Maroon struggle in the Maroons in the Forest of Freedom, and the other, Polly Patullo, a white British progressive who wrote about the Maroon struggle in Your Time Is Done Now. Why is this important? Well, other than our brothers and sisters in the July 12th movement led by, or the 12th of July movement led by outstanding activists for democracy and justice, Bernard Wilshire and others, we have seen very little scholarship from our own. And so this is a moment when all Dominicans, in particular the boys and girls, who over the past 20 years have been misled in carnival-type celebrations without any debate about our condition, without any panel discussions about our condition, without any essay writing contest about our condition. They've been given spectacle and high-priced singers and high-priced entertainers in a circus-like atmosphere, an atmosphere bereft of any sort of intellectual probing of our condition. We hope that these young boys and girls can follow in the scholarship and outstanding and intellectually productive example of our own brother, our beloved brother, Dr. Thompson Fontaine. What Dr. Fontaine has done, he's peeled back the veil of ignorance, darkness, and misinformation about our history, which caused for persons like myself and Irving Andre to go through high school and sixth form college without any opportunity to read any book about the struggle of persons of African descent. We heard of Drake and Hawkins, Queen Victoria and Elizabeth I. We never heard about Jacko. We never heard about Bala or Congaree. In fact, I give some credit because credit is due. It was only during the 1970s in the Dominica story that Lennox Honeychurch began in very limited ways to speak about those heroes. And now we have a Dominican of distinction who has given us a piece of work that will allow for us to understand that we are where we are today. We have the freedoms we enjoy because persons who in that period were considered subversive, persons who in that period were killed, jailed, hung rather at the Rosa Market. Today we see them as our heroes. And so we salute Brother Fontaine because we are not cockroaches, you see. We salute Brother Fontaine because we are not damn stupid people, you see. We salute Brother Fontaine because we are not garbage, you see. We salute Brother Fontaine because we are not pigs in Dominica, you see. We Dominican people are people of virility, substantiality, and an imperishable desire and thirst for liberty. And for those of you who today coming in supposedly on the backs of a party which dedicated itself to workers and to Dominicans from the rural areas and Dominicans who sought to educate themselves, let the message go forth this evening that we shall not relent, that like Jacko, Bala, and Congaree, we shall not give up, that we shall give four-square support to Thompson Fontaine and all those who walk in the spirit of our Maroon ancestors. We ask you to study our history. We ask you to be imbued with the spirit of defiance of our history. We ask you to be fired up by the unquenchable fires of liberty, and to always remember that our sacrifices today are in no way comparable to the sacrifices that our forebears made on Dominica to establish our freedom. So let the word go forth that as a people of dignity and intelligence, we shall be relentless in the quest for freedom, as those folks back then, Bala, Jacko Congaree, as so well illuminated in Thompson's book, stood up for freedom. God bless you, Thompson. And I trust that this evening, though few in number, you are awesome and numerous in the courage that you've exhibited to associate with Thompson Fontaine at a time of great darkness on our island, where the flame of liberty is slowly but surely being extinguished, unless and until we can raise high that beacon of hope and light our way to a better future. Thank you very much, Thompson, for all you've done. And thanks to all of you for standing up and to learn today and tonight and always our imperishable history, a history of victory, and we shall overcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Christian. Thank you very much for your words. Dr. Fontaine, let's try again to see if the audio is working on your end. So take it away. Let's try again.
Is this working?
All right, let's try this one. See? Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Can you hear me? Okay. Still loud? All right.
No, we're good. Just the way it is.
All right, excellent. All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Gabe, and thank you for this. It's really very interesting, you know, in terms of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish with the history of Dominica. Dominica's history is so crucial and so critical, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I see Ms. Patillo here, who is quoted extensively in my book, because she did a very important piece of work with the trials, the Maroon trials of 1813 and 1814. That's where a number of our women in particular stood up. Many of them lost their lives. Many of them their heads were cut off and so on. The sacrifice that they made. I'm going to, at this time, invite Mr. Henry Shillingford, who is very much involved in the Mauinage movement and in looking at the history of our ancestors. I'll have him come and say a few words. I caution him that he has between 4 and 6 minutes. So I'm confident that he will hit to this.
Thank you very much, Thompson. I had to put on like my Mauer hairstyle after following Gabriel and Irving. I thank you very much, Thompson. Much people don't invite me to speak anymore. I wonder why. I think because I'm very encouraged by Irving's energy, as well as Gabriel's connection, the consciousness to today. And so I thank Thompson very much for this opportunity and for his book that adds to a great history and a growing recognition of the importance. Gabriel didn't mention what I think to be maybe the best work so far on Mauer, which is Farcel, which is a novel written by, what's his name again, my good friend, former financial secretary, Alec Lazar, because he puts all the Mauers into one space at one time, and that wasn't true in fact, but he brings the story alive. And as we know as Africans, the story is more important than the facts. The story really gives the depths of everything. Facts can fool you. I know that as a lawyer. And Thompson is really important because Thompson he's just come from the beginning of humanity in Africa. And he's come to a place where he began to publish about a people and a place where, if history well applied, could actually be the source of what may be a new beginning for Africans. And I say this with now hyperbole. I think Dominica and this story is the story of the world right now. And I point to Haitian historian Jean Casimir, who after studying Caribbean history, and Dominica in particular, he said that all Caribbean societies, contemporary Caribbean societies, are based on colonial society. Even Haiti, all except Dominica. Dominica is based on a maroon society, a wild society. It was never colonialized in the true sense. And as much as the history of Mauans have been written, including Thompson, the history of Mauinage and Maua is even deeper and before that time. Because everything is geography, everything. Peoples, their physical features, their cultural traits are based on geography. And that is true for Dominica, as it is for everywhere. And it has defined Dominica. That geography has brought about two critical facts that are of critical importance when looked at in the global contemporary world. One is that we have the only original people, the Kalinago of the Caribbean. And that Caribbean is the source of capitalism. Slavery is the source of capital. So contemporary society would not exist. Chinese economy would not exist without slavery and the slave economy. And Eric Williams pointed that out, because you could not have capitalism without slavery. Anybody did Economics 101, land plus labor equals capital. If you get free land and free labor for 300 years, you got lots of capital. And they got lots of capital. But Dominica was the anathema to that, because its very geography did not participate in its cane economy. That's the original economy. And later, without its coves and beaches, it couldn't exist in its tourist economy. And as Polly has pointed out in another book, The Last Resort, Dominica is the last resort. And this story of the Maroons is that. So not only did it have the original people of the Kalinago in the Caribbean, Dominica, and this is breaking news. This is Oprah Winfrey news. Dominica is the only place in all of transatlantic slavery, from Maine to Chile, which had free Africans coming here before colonialists. And they continued to come for 80 years. You hear what I'm saying? Free Africans came here for 80 years before colonialism. Martinique was a fully developed slave and colonial society by 1630. They were making sugar and rum. Martinique, Saint-Pierre was the capital. I see Saint-Pierre every day, every night I go home. You can see it from Grand Bay. 15 kayaks made it over 3 years ago from Saint-Pierre to Grand Bay Beach. So Africans have been escaping from Martinique since 1680. They did not go to the hills of Martinique. They came to Dominica. They came to Point Caribe. And so they continued to come. And this is not just true by empirical evidence, but by overall circumstances. But when the British took their first census in 1765, there were 300 Negroes here already. And so Dominica has this Mauinage, this wildness that does not fit into contemporary society. Contemporary society is homogenized. It's very strict. We are frustrated Dominica because of its wildness. But I am saying to understand the Mauinage, that we are all on in Dominica, because we are subject. That's why we can have bouillon. That's why you can have dreads. So it's the only place in Rasta society where you have the culture coming before the theology. Everywhere else that Rasta emerged, Haile Selassie and the consciousness of Rastafari was first, and then the Livity came after. In Dominica, you had dreads living as nom-tier before they were aware of who Haile Selassie was. And so you have these phenomenon, convergences in this little place. Remember, small is beautiful. The stone that the builder refused becomes the head cornerstone. There's the potential of possibilities. So Dominica really is a place of great potential if we realize what this Mauinage really means. And Thomas has added a tremendous work. And I wanted to ask you this personally, but I'm so inappropriate, Thompson. But I wondered why you stopped at 1818. And so, because slavery went to 1834. And so, we're very honored to have this opportunity to be in this time where you can live in a place that has two of the most important facts. As simple as you take it, the original people of the Caribbean, which is the source of today's economy, and you have Africans coming to a place in that society during that time free, because when they came here, the French could not chase them. This was Kalinago territory. And so when they were here, they were free. In fact, if they came, they didn't have the law of the sea, but within 12 miles or halfway, they were free Africans coming to Dominica. And so Thompson, I am really encouraged, really encouraged, because I'm planning a Mao camp for youths between Martinique and Dominica. So this is really exciting that you've done this, and you've come all the way from Africa, where I want to go. I really want to go there. They don't like me much here. I like here, but they don't like me much. So, Thompson, thank you very much. And thank you, Gabriel. And thank you. Oh, my hairstyle is falling over. Damn, you could have told me something. Is it, brother? Anyway, I think likeness is important. We can't be too serious all the time. We get to be like white people. And we don't want to be like that. Even white people here, like Polly, don't want to be like white people. She want to be like us. That's why she's here. And Polly has added a lot. And in fact, we're working on a little comic book, aren't we, Polly? Thank you very much, Thompson, for this opportunity. And thank you all so much for encouraging Thompson. And I hope whoever's listening that we'll even get somebody to really go to Martinique and do the research and find the slaves that escaped and so on. But I guarantee you it's true. So this empirical evidence, which is what white people like, I like, and black people like, does it make sense? It totally makes sense. And so, Thompson, thanks again. And thank you and all of the TV audience. Well, where are they? I thought they were here. Where'd you go? Anyway, you know, I'm a man of the soil. Oh, there you go. Thank you, everyone, for Gabriel, Irving. Okay, thank you. I didn't go over time, did I?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. All right, Simon, I'm going to toss it back to you for final
Yes.
guess, yeah?
Yes, thank you, Thompson. So we also have with us, I think I need to mute you because there's a back. So let me just mute you for 1 second. We also have with us Dr. Dale Dangavel to say a few words. So you can go ahead. Let's make sure he's on the screen. So you can go ahead with your words regarding the book. Unmute your mic.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be part of this wonderful program, and kudos to my brother, Dr. Fontaine, a real doctor, my former teacher, a colleague, and a neg Mauin. You know, Thompson has written a gift. It is the most in-depth account of the Dominican neg Mauin. It is truly cinematic in its account, and it brings you into the past with the ancestors, and you feel their sacrifice that they've made for us today. It is needed today more than ever, since we have truly lost the understanding of our ancestry and the struggles that they went towards liberation. We must never forget that history, especially today as we examine critical race. I applaud Dr. Fontaine, and this book itself will go down in history as we research and write our own history. As I read this book, my heart sings. As we look at this Eurocentric thing that was shoved down our throats and we reject it. I have rejected it for a long time. The heroes that were made for me, such as Hawkins and Drake, we reject that. And Dr. Thompson brings forth Bala and Congaree. You know, I will close by shouting out Grand Fond, Land of Bala. As I read this book, I understood so much of the things that I did not learn in Dominica. When the posse left, when they left Rosalie and they were heading up to Grand Fond, where Bala was, to find him, and I think the son of, and this is all from Thompson's writing, the son of Congaree, the son of Mabuya was with Bala, because Congaree had moved further north. There were 7 Negroes with that posse. And the reason why I'm highlighting that, because all that is in the book, this is historic. I wear Marcus Garvey's shirt because this is the same thing that happened to Garvey. There is always some of us that brings down some of us. We talk about the Judases. Also, through this, we see this over and over again. Those of us who hate those of us. I will end by saying this. Long live Bala, long live Jacko, long live, but long live Dr. Thompson Fontaine. He's one of the best of us. What we want for our children to grow up to be. He is an example of what a humble young man from the countryside of Dominica can do and what he became. But this book is a gem. This book is a gift, and it will go down in history, as Gabriel said, written by us, for us. Reject this Eurocentric view. Long live the Neg Maron. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for that. And so, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, we want to go back over to you. We know that you have a presentation that you would like to now show us. And then, of course, we want to engage the audience. So we will take questions from both the audience in Dominica as well as some questions and comments from our Facebook audience. So, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, over to you.
To the presentation, but the way things are going tonight, I'm a bit skittish on this. But I'm going to try. I have a presentation that I would like to give to you. So if we can do that in just a little while. I wanted to all right, I'm guessing that we can all see this. All right, it should appear shortly.
Yes, we can.
So, all right, Samuel is not showing up. It's not. All right, so. I think I jinxed this a bit because
You opened that incorrect
oh, is
slide.
it? Oh, it's the wrong one. It's the wrong one. Okay.
So again, well,
all right, so we are getting it set up. Yes.
Let's try again.
So it's because I have nothing there. All right, I think we're okay. That's a relief. That's my nephew, yeah. Yes. Yes. All right, well, I wanted to do a quick presentation on the book. I know most of you have it. And those of you who would still like a copy, we have ordered several, and we're also looking to put them in the bookstores here. So if you have not received a copy tonight, just leave me your name and your telephone number. As soon as we get it, we'll have it delivered to you. I wanted to just go very briefly through this. And can you help me again? Just just help me with the moving. Yeah. Just move to the next slide. Yeah. All right. I wanted to do this in this way. it's not a full presentation, but I want to do it in like 15 minutes. I want to hear from you. I want to get as much feedback as possible. But I want to give you a little background to the book, a brief history of how we got here, and also the powerful story of the Maroons, and also the impact. And that's one of the things when I started to research the book that I found out that has not been taught or not been told to us. But the role that the Maroons of Dominica played in the abolition of slavery and the abolition of the slave trade. A lot of people think highly of the Jamaican Maroons, but in the research, and you will see in the book, documented in the British Parliament, that it was the Maroons of Dominica that gave them the headache, not the Maroons of Jamaica. The Maroons of Jamaica, they signed treaties. All right, they signed treaties. The Maroons of Dominica never, ever signed the treaties with the colonial masters. They remained free throughout. That was not the case with the Jamaican Maroons. So that is set straight in the history, and that's one of the things that really struck me. A lot of work went into actually the National Archives in the UK, where it's amazing the amount of material that is there on Dominica. Every letter that was ever written by the governors, every parliament sitting, everything is documented there in the National Archives in the UK. And anybody wanting to do research can go in there and do the laborious work of going for those records, but they're there. Another main source for me, which was very welcome, was to get the source from the newspapers of the day. Dominica was so critical that newspapers in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, in Ireland, in the United States, they were writing about Dominica. So what started me on the journey was a few years ago, I was listening to a lecture from Dr. Edward Scobe, one of the foremost writers on African history and one of the foremost scholars in that area. He wrote the most definitive work about the origins of Africa, our own Dr. Edward Scobe. And I was listening to him, and he talked about Bala and Grand Form. And he talked about Rosalie as well and the Bala state. So when I started thinking about this, I decided to go online. So I signed up to a newspaper portal that has old newspapers. And I decided to type in the word Bala into this search engine. And I was shocked. I was floored. Type in Bala and just reference after reference after reference. I found over 250 references of Bala in newspapers in the United States, North Carolina, Philadelphia, in Ireland, in Scotland, and so on, about Bala and the exploit and what he did on December 17, 1784. Incredible stuff. And so I spent in the book about 3 chapters on Bala, because in a way that gives you a very good insight into what the Maroons were all about and what their thinking was all about. So I'm going to start, give a very brief, and I'm going to do it mainly pictorially with a few pictures. This is a picture of General Rollo, who in 1760 captured Dominica. Now, up to that time, since when Columbus came to Dominica, and Columbus, in his own words, described that he found people on Dominica, because when he came through on his second voyage, he came up on the eastern side of Dominica. He left one boat. He moved on to Marigoland. He left one boat, and they came around the north of Dominica, and they found themselves in very calm and still waters. And then they saw people on the beaches. And these people that they began to call savages. And there is a history as to how that all came about and the cannibals. But they welcomed Columbus. They welcomed that particular ship that landed. They gave them cassava. They gave them a lot of, pineapples and so on that they had. And all of that is recorded in the logs of Columbus. So the Kalinagos were there when he first arrived. Now, between that time, between the arrival of Columbus in 1493, and for over 250 years, Dominica remained a neutral country. It was the spot for pirates, for adventurers, Hawkins, for example, all of those famous privateers we hear about, they all came through Dominica for over 250 years. In the meantime, in Jamaica, Barbados, St. Kitts, and so on, the British had started to have slaves. So slaves came to Dominica very late. Already in 1627 in Barbados, in 1650 in Jamaica, in 1637 in St. Kitts. Already they were importing slaves. A number of the people, and Henry spoke to it a little bit, a number of the already the slave plantations in Martinique, when they escaped, they would come to Dominica. The lumbers, they needed timber and lumber for firing the sugar mills and so on in Martinique and Guadeloupe. And these Frenchmen, they would come, they would bring with them their slaves from Guadeloupe to cut the timber and to take it back. And some of them would simply not go back. They would just stay, they would just vanish up in the hills. And that's why you have the tradition even of the Creole, of the Maroon speaking Creole, because that's what they came, most of them came, the very early ones came from Martinique and Guadeloupe. So in 1760, when Rollo took over Dominica, he landed there. And that's a picture of some of his ships in the Rosa Harbor when he landed, took over. And then he declared that Dominica was for the British. Okay, so that's when that was the first time they established. Within 3 years of Rollo coming into Dominica, they began importing slaves into Dominica in large numbers. And Dominica was a very central point in the Atlantic journey. So much so that in 1766, Dominica became a free port. So that the boats coming from the coast of Africa, they would first stop in Dominica, and from there, they would be separated, they would bathe in the river and so on, and get all the beauty of Dominica, and then they would be dispatched to other islands, including to the United States. So in the book, for example, I tell the story of two important individuals, call them the Princes of Calabar. And these two gentlemen, Little John and Robin John, they were royalty in Guinea. They were tricked into the slave ship. They were taken to Dominica. They arrived in Dominica with one thing on their mind, to escape and to go back to where they came from. They made a deal with a ship owner who promised that he would take them back to Africa. Instead, they were sold to Virginia, to slave owners in Virginia. They were taken to Virginia. From Virginia, they went to England. And the story is a really fascinating one. I kind of paraphrased it in the book, but that's a story if you want to read. There is material out there on these two very important gentlemen, the Princes of Calabar. Anyway, these two gentlemen ended up buying their freedom in like 1788, the earliest freed slaves, and they eventually made their way back to Africa. Following their footsteps was one person called Bala. Okay, and that just shows a picture of a slave, the market, if you like, in Africa. You can continue. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about some of those Negma that came to Dominica. One of them was Bala. Bala got here in 1764. As I said, it's all in the newspapers of the day. It's like now, 100 years from now, if you go back, you'll see news of Ukraine and Russia, right? Front pages, the same thing, that was it. Bala from Dominica made the front pages, and there is the story about where he came from, a Mandingo prince from Guinea. As soon the same day he arrived in Dominica, he escaped. So he never spent one day in slavery. And he became, they used to call him the chief of chiefs, because they maintained that African thing. Because that's how the Maroon plantations and things, that's how they were built. They had this respect for chiefs and so on, the same similar system in Africa. So Bala rose to become the most feared Maroon chief in Dominica. And later on, he would relate to people like Farcel. His deputy was Mabuya, at one time Congori, another very famous Maroon. But the important thing about Bala is that he was able to escape. And he was able to not only escape, I just remember I should be doing something so that he was able to escape. All right, so if I turn my camera on, yeah, it will be easier for the audience. Okay. So he was able to escape, and he made his way to the mountains of Dominica. And for over 20 years, from 1764 to 1784, his main task was to entice slaves to leave the plantations. So he would come down from the hills, he would entice them to leave the plantations. Now, a few years after, and I put this reference there, I hope you can see it, and it's a very important reference because the very early African slaves, they had the practice of Obia. It was called Obi. And that's where they got some of their invincibility. They believed that, for example, that nothing could hurt them. And if you see what they had, it says that Obi, for the purpose of bewitching people or consuming them by lingering illness, is made of grave dirt, hair, teeth of sharks and other creatures, blood, feathers, eggshells, images in wax, the hearts of birds, and some potent roots, weeds and bushes, of which Europeans are at this time ignorant, but which were known for the same purposes to the ancients. Practices that happened in ancient Egypt, carried over in the New World. And Bala was a mezzo-seer. Bala was very much into this. In fact, after his sacking of the Rosalie estate, the first encounter he had with the colonials, they did not capture him, but they captured his Obia bag. And they described the contents of the bag. It included, by the way, the skull of the manager of the Rosalie estate, one of the people that he killed. So after he killed him, he took his scalp and he carried that with him. And in chasing him, he dropped the bag. And all of that is reported in the papers, in the newspapers of the day. The story of the search for Bala, what happened and so on. But I've kind of gone ahead a little bit. Let me go back. Bala in 1784, in December, that was a highlight of a number of attacks, because the attacks had started on the West Coast with Fassel and some of the other slaves attacking the estates. They would go in, they would attack the estates, they would kill the animals, they would take food, and they would go back up to the hills. And at the same time, they would take slaves with them. What made the Bala attack on Rosalie stand out is that they did not simply attack the estate and escaped, but they captured the entire estate with about 200 Negmawan or Maroons from all over Dominica. Bala and his deputy, Congori, were able to go into the Rosalie estate. They killed the 4 of the 5 white men that were including Mr. Gamble, who was the manager of the estate. And they spent 2 days. I think I have a quote. All right, here is this quote there, the second quote from a newspaper that tried to capture what happened on the Rosalie estate in December of 1784. It says that humanity revolts at the shocking sequence. After having given to their savage thirst of blood full scope, they spread a long table in the dwelling house, which they covered with the plate and cutlery of the Honorable Lieutenant Governor Stuart. And having killed all the stock they could find, they, whilst their drums were beating and guns firing, gave themselves up to every excess of riot and inebriety. In fact, it describes how Bala took on the coat of the masters and, a blue with yellow trimmings. And he sat at the head of the table. For 2 days they ate, they drank, they killed all the animals. And there is a quote, one of my favorite quotes in the book. This is what Congori, who was, and when they attacked, Congori's son was killed. His son was killed by the manager, who got his son first. And he was so enraged, he dealt the death blow to the manager. But before he did, that's what he told him. That is what I wanted you. And now he's telling him, while he's about to finish killing him off, he says, that is what I wanted you are now in your grave. Now, my boys, set fire. That's incitement, right? Sounds like incitement. Burn down the plantation. And they went on to do that. One of the other things about the Rosalie estate is that they killed a few of the, what they call the friendly slaves. There was a slave that was Augustine that vowed he would give his life for his master. Augustine, one of the house slaves. He was also killed. And a lot of that, of the story of Rosalie is told by one of the other house slaves who escaped. And she walked from Rosalie to Roseau to give the story of what happened. But at the end of the day, 180 slaves were liberated from the Rosalie estate. And that was huge. It was huge. It was frightening to the colonial masters because it meant that if a few slaves well armed could take over an estate, then what could happen? Because they said that Rosalie, and in the book you'll see how Rosalie was supposed to be well fortified, one of the more fortified estates in Dominica. Yet they successfully went in, they killed everybody, and were able to liberate those slaves. And later on, the story goes on and talks about how they tried to hunt them down. It took several months before they eventually were able to capture him. But in the first encounter that I spoke about earlier, that is when he left his Obia bag. And they were able to detail in the newspaper of the day, detail the contents of the Obia bag. They thought that when they had found his Obia bag, that would have weakened him and they would somehow get him, but it took a lot longer because obviously they knew the forest. He was an expert marksman, and it took them a long time. But all of that is detailed in the book. There are 3 chapters on Bala because of the way that he was able to really stand up and stand out. Now, this is referred to, the period I'm talking about very early on in around between 17, when the slave started in the 1770s, and then in 1778, Dominica was taken over by the French. The capture of Dominica by the French is also well detailed there in the book. The French took over, and at the time, the French actually aided and abetted the plantation, the Neg-Maron. In fact, a lot of the muskets and the guns and so on that they got it from the French, because the French felt that they could actually use them to defend Dominica against recapture from the British. So the French really supported the Negro, and it was during that time the numbers began to grow and so on. So during that period, we had the first Maroon War, when Dominica was again recaptured by the British. This Governor John Ord took over and decided to wage war. And that period is referred to as the First Maroon War. And during that time, this account is written by Archibald Gloucester, who was one of the judges that Ms. Patillo spoke about, that actually did some of the trials of the slaves, of the Maroons. But he was writing in 1813, but referring to the period of the 1760s and 1770s. And he said that a sanguinary warfare prevailed between the runaway slaves and the inhabitants, their masters, which spread destruction in many quarters of the colony and dismay throughout all. I have always understood that the whole white and free-colored population of the island was for a long period actively engaged in quelling these daring insurgents, and that it was only accomplished after a great sacrifice of lives and a ruinous expenditure of the public funds. Independent of the evils necessarily attendant upon internal insurrection, unpleasant political animosities subsisted between Governor John Ord and the inhabitants, which continued until he left the command in December 1792. So he was describing that period, and that's when detailed in the book, a number of attacks on estates in Layu, in Coliho, all across Dominica. The slaves, they were rising up, they were resisting, and every time there was a hurricane, by the way, they would get more numbers because the hurricanes would open everything up, and the slaves would actually move out. All right. Now, this is a picture of a black West Indian regiment soldier, and I'm giving you little tidbits of the book because the white in the quote before, in the 1790s and so on, most of the efforts to capture the Negmawa, those efforts were done by the whites. They were the ones, whites and colored, the free people who actually were chasing after them. And every now and then they would hire those slaves. All right, there's house slaves to help them because the slaves, they knew the plantation. In fact, one of the things that they actually tried to do was to infiltrate the slave plantation. So they would send slaves pretending to be Negmawa, get a lay of the land, find out where they were situated, and then those slaves would just sneak out of the camps and go back and tell them. So that's how they used them. But then in early 1800, they actually set up a West India regiment made up of slaves coming directly from Africa. They would put them into this and then use them now to go and hunt the Negmawa. And these West India regiment soldiers were responsible in the end. And one of the leaders, one of the colored leaders, was a certain Captain Sevre. Okay? You know, history is interesting, you know. History is very interesting. So I would like you to pay very special attention to Captain Sevre in the book, The Maroons of Dominica. Just pay very special attention, yeah, because he was very instrumental in getting and recruiting these blacks to then go up against their brothers in the bush to find the tracks and to find them. Now, there is a story of this. I don't know if you can. I'm going to read this for you because this is very important. But let me give you the background to this. In 1812, one of the most bloodthirsty governors ever to visit Dominica, by the name of Robert Ainsley. He was originally in Grenada. Then he came to Dominica with one thing on his mind: to exterminate the Maroon population of Dominica. He passed, within days of him arriving in Dominica, he did a proclamation to put to death men, women, and children. And that made headline news in the United Kingdom because they were saying, what's going on in the Caribbean? How can, you know, I have some very important quotes in the book that where even the British public were revolted by this gentleman, Robert Ainsley. So Robert Ainsley decides that he would send a slave to like a kind of an envoy, what they call an envoy, to try to entice a very famous slave. We don't talk much about this Negmawa by the name of Kwashi. His name was Kwashi. Kwashi is noted for putting a bounty on the head of the governor. He put a bounty on the head of the governor. All right? And Governor Ainsley sends the slave to try to entice Kwashi and his group, as well as Pangloss was operating in the Grand Bay area, to come back. All right? He says, we're giving you like a truce, okay? If you come, we will not kill you, but you stay up there. When this slave arrived to meet with Kwashi, Kwashi had him captured. He captured the slave, and he appointed his chief justice, Fabian, said by the name of Fabian. They held a mock trial with Fabian as the presiding chief justice. This slave, poor slave, was found guilty and immediately executed. So a few months later, Chief Justice Fabian was caught. All right? So he was taken down to the Rosa Market, found guilty for killing this envoy, and he too was put to death. And the day after his death, this particular poem appeared on the gallows in Roseau and around the town of Roseau. And here is what it says. In this town, so devoted to faction and strife, a Negro Chief Justice was tried for his life. Of his fate should a stranger among us inquire. On the gallows, the wretch was allowed to expire. But what had he done to incur the disgrace? Was the heart of old Fabian as black as his face? Oh no, my good sir, for a sentence he died, that he passed in the woods on an envoy he tried. Perhaps by the laws of a chief he obeyed, he was forced to abide, and his judgment was swayed. Perhaps he might think that the man came as a spy, and that his offense he might legally try. if he erred from the head in condemning the slave, this had as his justice should sleep in the grave. But another Chief Justice, long time I have eyed, who instead of the black in his place should have died. Much whiter I own to the view is his skin, and no blackness without, but all the blackness within, a traitor to God, to the laws and his king, who justly deserves on this gallows to swing. So you get the sense that in this society, especially during the time of Ensley, where he was hunting the Maroons down mercilessly, and he killed hundreds. And one of the good things about this book is that I was able to get the record that shows the names. And we have over 534 names, and I've reprinted every single name because those names meant something. Genevieve, Victor, and a lot of French names in there, you'll see. But just one name. But all of the slaves that were during those 2 years of Robert Ensley's rule that were either executed or captured or banished. I'll give you another story that is related in this book. They got to the point where the punishment for the Maroons who were captured, for the Negma who were captured, was either death or banishment. Okay, they did not want them around, or they would put them in what they call a chain gang. They would put them to chains and work them for a few months, and then they would ship them out of Dominica. So I was able to come across a newspaper account of one of those slaves that was shipped to St. Kitts, because we did not have the same situation in the other islands. All of that was happening there in Dominica, the revolt and the rebellions was in Dominica. But in St. Kitts and Antigua, the slaves there, they were docile. They had no mountains, probably because they had no mountains to hide in. But they were for the most part docile. So this particular slave from Dominica, this particular Negmawa, who was captured, who is angry, is banished to St. Kitts. And the newspapers tell the story. He gets into St. Kitts, and the day after he arrives, he attacks a school where the plantation owner was having school for the whites of this. He stormed into the school. I believe he killed 2 or 3 of the white kids in there. And then he said, no, you are not my problem. My problem is the owner of this estate. So he goes across to his home. He finds him just about ready to have breakfast with his family. And the story is given in graphic detail in this newspaper. It's reported there. He was about to strike this plantation owner when again a house slave held him down. A black man like himself, who was obediently serving his master in the house, intervened. But the punishment for this Dominica Negmawa was brutal, and it is described in the newspaper. They decided that in a quick trial, obviously, that he would be killed, but they were not satisfied to simply do as they would normally do, just hang them or execute them. They broke all of his limbs. Okay, they broke his hands, they broke his neck, they broke his legs. Then they hung him. After he was hung, they burned him. And the person reporting on this said they have never seen a more stoic, a more resilient person than this man. They said the man never made one sound. He took his punishment like a man. He took his punishment. All of that brutality was measured out to him, not a sound. It's in the book. You see, so wherever the Negmawa went, that spirit, they carried it with them of revolt, of rebellion, of resistance to slavery, because slavery was evil. I know I don't want to speak too long, but let me tell you another part of this book that I found was very interesting. When in 17, and that was some of the punishment, that's a drawing of a slave stuck up on a pole because that's what they would do. They would cut off their heads and put it on a pole. And then, I go into much detail because we have a very good and descriptive, good discussion of the capture of Bala. It was detailed, as I said, in all of the newspapers, so you have a very good account in the book, where after Bala, and you get the sense that Bala believed in his Obia thing, because even when he realized he was surrounded, he did not die for cover. He took out 2 of these guys. After he killed 2 of them, they shot him. And we have his last words. He was calling for his wife, Kande, and he's calling her in Creole. He's speaking in Creole and asking Kande, saying, "Bois pas bon encore, bois camo." He saw his death, and he's there saying all of this. And all of these words are captured by the person who was killing him. After they shot him, they took his head off so that they would show it around Roseau. But they also did something else. This guy cut off his hat. All right, he cut his hat and pulled his hat out as a trophy. And this is the heart of Bala that gave us so much trouble, that created so much confusion, that almost brought the whole system of slavery to the hills in Dominica. I don't have time to tell you about the other uprising in 1791 that was led by Facel, where the west, the coast, the Sorendos in Boutica and so on, who were slave owners at the time, and the Robinsons, that they slavery almost was ended there. What saved them was that there were 2 warships at the time in port, and they dispatched the soldiers through the Lake Road, through Grand Fort and down to Dalis to quell the uprising. But that is detailed there in the book as well. But I want to talk very briefly about the abolition of slavery. So when in about 1791, William Wilberforce, a young William Wilberforce, we all know about in our history, he rose to give a very eloquent defense of what he thought should be an end to the British slave trade. He was quoting what was going on in Dominica. He was quoting the cruelty that was being meted out to slaves in Dominica, that forced those slaves to run to the mountains. He talked about young people growing up in the mountains, not seeing a white man, growing up as young people. They grew up all their lives not knowing white people. He was making reference to Dominica because in Dominica, there was a certain rector of the Anglican Church, Peter Charles, who documented in excruciating detail the treatment of the slaves in Dominica, and in particular in Negmao. There was particularly harsh treatment for the Negmao. And so he detailed all of that in his book. And then he personally delivered those trials, and there's a whole literature out there on that. He personally delivered that to Wilberforce, secretly in England, so that Wilberforce would have ammunition to argue against slavery. And I probably do not have it there, but this guy in the middle there is Inslee. All right, this is Inslee and this is Governor Ord. They're in the picture. All right, that is Robert Inslee and Governor Ord. So Wilberforce used what happened in Dominica, and it's on the strength of this that he was able to argue against the slave trade. It took several months, actually, several years. He started in 1779. The abolition came in 1807. We have a very detailed progression in the book about how that came about. But throughout this time, we had the uprising in Dominica, the 1791 uprising. In fact, there is a quote in the book from the records of Parliament that blames Wilberforce for starting the revolt in Dominica in 1791, because it was said that because they heard Wilberforce arguing about what was going on, the news got to Martinique. Martinique then brought the information to Dominica that Wilberforce had received their freedom And the Dominican slaves were the first and the only slaves to uprise. So use that to say they are not working again. They put down their tools, they're not working. And many of them joined the ranks of the Negmaon on the strength of that. So it took many, many years. And I just want to end by saying that Wilberforce, from a 32-year-old man, it took him all of those years, 21 and plus 7, almost 28 years, to get the abolition of the slave trade. And it took a further 27 years or so to abolish the slave trade. On the day after the proclamation was made that all slaves in the British West Indies would be free, Wilberforce died. The day after the proclamation. And so I am proud, in a way, to see what the impact of Dominica was on the abolition debate. And there are lots of quotes in there, a lot of evidence in there. But the suffering of the slaves is very much a part of what happened, the trials of 1813 and 1814, that I did not go too much into detail, because I said there's an excellent book by Mrs. Patillo, who is here with us tonight, and I'm talking about the trial. She goes into detail. And you have to read those trials. Get a copy of this book from Miss Patillo, because it goes into, the trial, what they call the trial, where those women were brought and they were imprisoned or killed for stealing that person's still provision, or they left the estate to plant their own garden or something, and they were killed, and all of those things that, is just beyond comprehension. But the barbarity that took place at this courthouse in Roseau, right there, it detailed story after story of the execution. And one of the things that Robert Ainsley did, before they would have a trial, and it would take a few days, and then they would execute the person. He put something in place where the trial would take place in the morning, in the afternoon. And even when the jury said, well, okay, we extend, he would say, no, he would override trial. You're going to gallows this afternoon. So, and just the number of slaves. And in there, thankfully, we have the record. Their names are not forgotten. And if you're going to have children, it'd be good to name some of them after Genevieve. These are nice names. Ruth, Rachel, Victor. Very good, in there. All right, so that gives you a flavor of what's in the book. I'm going to open up for any questions or any observations that you might have. I could go on all night, because as you can tell, that is an exciting part of our history, and one that we're very proud of. Okay, can you give him the microphone, please? Yes.
One. My mic sounds nice. Ready? I just wanted to know what the term maroon meant, because I'm confused, What exactly is the term maroon or Mauan? What's it meant? So escape.
Okay. The maroon, in fact, it's in the book, where that word came from. It is really from the hunters of wild hogs. And it was first given to those who had escaped in Jamaica. So that's how these hunters of wild hogs somehow became maroons. But the word is a Spanish word, maruno. Maruno. So from maruno, we got maroons. And of course, the maroons for us, the Creole, the neg mamon, as a black, yeah. Maroons, yeah. Yes. Yeah, but that's where it started, and they were a lot earlier than we were in Dominica, because slavery was, in fact, by the time Dominica slaves began to come into Dominica, the maroon system had almost died out in Jamaica. You can hardly find any account of maroon activity in that period. Yes, it's possible that some of those maroons actually ended up there, because we had a history of slaves who had escaped in the other islands coming up to Dominica. So it's quite possible. Yes. Okay, let's take Bernard and then Lennox. Yes. Bernard, okay. All right, Bernard, you have to speak into the mic.
All right, quick question, Thompson. I love the book. Of course, I'm a history buff, and I'm all for it. And I really think that is a very powerful indication of the Dominican spirit. But I must point out, as a history buff, right, that there's also a book that could be written about the other side of the coin, where Dominicans themselves did not support the Maroons. There was a large contingent, right, of the Rangers who hunted them down and were eventually successful in exterminating them. It were not actually the white folk. It was actually the Dominican Rangers, the black Rangers, who were actually successful against them. And the West Indian Regiment, and all the house slaves and the betrayals and all the folks who infiltrated them and took them down. At the end of the day, there is a very, the story is also true that Dominicans took down the Maroon movement. So, and I think that dichotomy continues, right, throughout Dominica's history. What we need and what we've never had is an overarching Afrocentric consciousness that unites us together as black folk. That we have a greater battle. That in fact, the battles that we fight against each other should be secondary to establishing a black nation as progressive on the world stage. And so I just wanted to point that out as part of the Dominican narrative, that there has always been this fight and this struggle of those who seek freedom and expression and Afrocentric identity, and those who have been more wedded to the ways of the plantation and conservatism and a certain way of life that they have inherited from the British tradition of colonialism. And so I think that has to be explored and discussed in any real historical conversations that we're having on the island.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have someone there, and then we'll go across to it. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, Doc, great presentation. In fact, I've heard the word rebellious come up so many times in your presentation. So we had rebellious slaves, and we know that. But I'm trying to figure it out. At that time, probably it was more related to plantation slavery. But now we see another flip of this in Dominica, whereby we see now probably economic slavery. And at that time, we often hear people say they inherit certain things from their grandparents. Why is it that the rebellious spirit has not continued? Was there some kind of re-education? Because to me, no. As people are more aware, they would become more defensive of their oppression and to defend their rights. So I'm seeing we're a bit more docile. In fact, you talk about St. Kitts and the other countries were more docile. And Dominican was more rebellious, the slaves. What caused that reverse? I mean, have you discovered any material that tells you, well, I'm just surprised and shocked.
I'm thinking of one word, but I will not say it. All right, let's hear. I'll comment on it in a while.
Yes. Good evening. I'm sitting here listening to you. Is my mic on? Yes. Relating this story, and I mean, I find it very, very overwhelming, and something that shocked me early on, that even make it more overwhelming, is the fact I was listening to the union program this afternoon, and I only now found out that history is no longer a compulsory subject at school. Now, if history is no longer a compulsory subject, well, people like me didn't even meet civics. I'm wondering if that might be a part of the answer to his question, but maybe my question to you is, what impact do you think that is going to have on us in the long run? How do you think it will affect us economically, patriotically? I mean, I'm shivering just asking the question that history is not compulsory. The child knows where he came from, and if you don't have an idea of where you came from, you don't know where you're going.
Yeah, that's incredible. That is, that's unthinkable to me that is in fact the case. Yes. Let me.
Yeah, good night. Thompson, just a follow-up question from what he's asking. I am a teacher at the St. Mary's Academy, and I have used, just because I'm involved in the arts myself and history and so on, not a history teacher, I'm a business tutor, a literature tutor, And I've brought many persons at SMA to speak. Rasmo, Jeff Joseph, I brought Franklin Georges. And trust me, look what's happening there. Our students are blank. Next generation don't know anything what you're talking about. This is a very serious thing. For instance, at this particular luncheon, I would expect to see history students from all secondary schools here. What do we do from here? Because we have a generation that is lost as far as that is concerned. And I'm telling you, as a teacher, I'm teaching at a school that was, started by white brothers. And a couple times I've been in the classroom, and sometimes when a brother passes, I'm seeing certain things, I have to say, well, I wonder what he's thinking. Because you have to really teach it as it is. And they really don't know. The other day I gave an exercise to do with some first and second formers. They did not even know who was Patrick John. Just the other day. And it's a very serious situation. So my thing is that we here know, and we are thirsting for information, even more information, from your book and other books. And it's nice that it came from a direction where we do not only have to know history, as I only knew it from Lennox Honey Church. Because I grew up on the Dominica story. Every morning I go into school, I had to listen to the Dominica story. It enthralled me, I say, but wow, all the things that, but just from a certain direction. You are presenting another direction. People like Para Revere, Dr. Willie presented a different direction, and in terms of the information they had. But then, that is for me. I'm departing. The probably average age inside here is around 50 or 60 years right now. And basically, what I'm asking about, what about our youth, our Ministry of Education? How are they going to get this type of history that we can read about our people in terms of our literature, or art? I wrote a song for Dr. Olin Bully. He's on his final days. He's not going to be with us forever. And we still have our House of Culture. Nobody's naming it after him. I made a claim for that to happen because we just don't know. We are a nation that are lost, and really and truly your work is complimentary, but what do we do with it now? And that's my question. What do we do with it now? Thank you.
Okay, let's take a roll and then let's play at the back and we'll...
Thank you. Very, very good piece of work, Dr. Fontaine. My question is, to me, I didn't get a sense that much was said about the Kalinago people. We know that the Kalinago people were here, and the camps that were set up by the chiefs, they had a system of hierarchy and organization. I would want to know what role did the Kalinago play in terms of assisting the Maroons, or the Neg Maroon, or the runaway slaves, in terms of assisting them and facilitating them in getting out of the plantations and setting up their own camps in the hills. What role did the Kalinago play in terms of supporting the rebellion by the black Africans?
Hi, Dr. Fontaine. Speaking of the youth, I just wanted to know, during your research, did you see anything about Bala's lineage, how many children he had? Where are his great-great-great-grands? Are they still here? Are they alive? I'm just interested in that. You're one of them? Hey!
Well, good night, ladies and gentlemen. I was about to ask that same question because Rosalie means a lot to me, and you would know that. Want to know the real connection, meaning that the enslaved people that was in Rosalie, if we could have that trace back to where we came from. Yeah? And she has the right question about the lineage of the people and them that follow. So I don't know if I follow in direct in there, because I in a lot of stuff there and I shiver in. Be very, very honest. So I think a research supposed to be done on the people and them in Rosalie area. Because as Mr. Schlinkford was talking about there, the whole movement of being the consciousness of the people and them back in the day, right? long before the movement of maybe the Black Power movement or the Rasta movement. Because I remember my queen, the way she was going and the way she was talking long before that Black Power movement and that kind of a vibe going on, the Rasta movement going on there, and her consciousness. So I could feel that tribal vibes in there. So I think some research is supposed to be done with the people and them from Rosalie.
Okay, Dr. Fontaine, I really sat and I'm much appreciative of what, was discussed tonight. I'm fortunate to have this book and I'm reading it, slowly digesting it. And I just want to reiterate what was said by his name is not coming to my mind. Yeah, right, Jackson, Jacko, all of them, same thing. I am saying people without their history will not know where they come from, neither know where they're going to. And that information is so vital that it cannot just be in a book. And as was stated, if you watch the average age, make an average of it, you see these are people who may have known or longing to know more, right? They have the zeal for knowledge. I am saying we need to find out what would you recommend for our young people, because they are the ones that are going to take the mantle. They are the ones who are going to take the baton and run with it. And if they do not have that knowledge, they will be talking anecdotally. They will not be talking on empirical data, so they need to have it. I was thinking here, and I'm conceptualizing that we may have to do it in a pictorial on audio or whatever, but it has to reach to them, so that is very critical, and I think we need to expound more on that.
All right, thank you. Let me try to respond to some of what was raised. Let me start with the question you raised about Bala's offspring. We know that Bala had 2 children, at least 2. The first time he was captured, the first time he was traced down, they found one of his children. The day that he was killed, there was a child there. The child was taken to Roseau, and history records that the governor took that child of Bala to England. We have not been able to find anything about him since. We've been trying, we've been combing, trying to see if there's any mention of what happened to him once he got to England. But he was moved to England with the the same governor, Odd. The question of the Kalinagos, that's detailed in the book. The Kalinago Indians, what they did, because of their familiarity with the forest and so on, they were the ones that actually guided the very early Negmawa. All right, so it's there in the book. They played a very pivotal role at the very early stages because they knew how to hide, and they passed that on. They passed on that skill, the different tracks and so on in Dominica, what to eat, the wild plants to eat and so on. They were the ones who passed that down to the Negmawa. Now, the issue that you raised, this is a very serious and it's very concerning. I mean, I taught high school history. And to learn that history is no longer compulsory, what is happening? So, what really is going on? One gets the sense that our country's been somehow, sold, and just it is unbelievable. What's going on? Why? I mean, how can you not know your history? How can you not be taught your history? I mean, that builds, just the fact, just the knowledge of what our ancestors did to resist slavery, to stand up against colonialism. That itself encourages us, encourages me. And to think that our children, grandchildren will not have access to this information or they're denied this information is beyond me. I cannot understand it. And I hope that people in the education system would rethink and really restructure our curriculum, because our children really need to know and to understand and to have this history. And as you said, look at this. I mean, I cannot imagine during my time in sixth form that we would have a forum like this and we're not all there listening. I mean, we'll be there as students. We'll probably be in the windows or we'll be listening to what's going on. It's like the generation is completely removed from good reality, and that's very unfortunate. All right, let's go. Let's see if we have any questions. Well, I would recommend that we put pressure on the system. We have to put pressure on the government to relook the curriculum. I mean, It cannot be that you cannot teach the history of your island, you know? Yes, Bernard.
Two questions. Really. One was the question, what will happen to Bala's son? On the day, in fact, Bala was captured, killed, before he died, I don't know if these were his last words, but he did address his son directly. And he said to him, remember, the Bekes killed your father. Now that boy was taken by the government, brought to England, and in those days, what they did was the rich families kept the blacks as exotic thing. They dressed them in these almost camouflage clothes, and they had them to serve, you know, the servants to serve, and it became a kind of, you know, conspicuous consumption kind of thing, where it was, you had arrived if you had some little black slave boy or girl or whatever serving your guests and so on. So that was Bala and his son. We don't know what happened to him, as Dr. Fontaine said. The second thing I wanted to mention was the question that I think somebody here raised about how our people were, no, not the Kalinagos, but how our people were radical, those Maroons were so radical, and yet it appears that today we've reached a way. Well, I thought about that myself in writing I introduced in writing the introduction to Paul's book, although I didn't dwell on that much. But it seemed to me that the whole aim of the struggle, the thing against the Maroons, was to cower the population, to make them so afraid. And in fact, after the Maroons were defeated, of course, Mauinage became less important in the sense that the conditions that the slaves lived under were slightly ameliorated. The English had set up, the British Parliament had passed this law requiring every 3 years that there should be registers of all the slaves on all the plantations. And they even said where they came from and what they did on those plantations. But they had to record them. And there was a much stricter not supervision, but accounting for what happened to the slaves. So Mauinage itself became less important. And of course, they had all these ranges in the hills and so on. But that tradition of radicalism was not lost. A few years after slavery, in 1844, I mean, there was a huge movement from Granby when, in fact, they tried to take a census of all the slaves, and the slaves believed that that census was only meant to know where the slaves were, to return them back to slavery. And it was a rebellion from Granby again, and slept all the way right down to Canefield and probably even further, 1844. And then, of course, you had the 1891 situation in 1891, I think it was, in La Plaine. Again, this time it was on taxes, on putting a tax on land. And you wonder why, for example, up till now, there's no government in Dominica after that has ever dared to suggest a tax on land. Eugenia Charles talked about it, but that would have been a step too far for her. She'd never did anything about it. And then, of course, you had in the 1970s the Dread movement. So that was another very radical movement. And very thing about our history. In fact, when people struggle, they struggle almost with the history in mind. And so the Dreads almost was a kind of repetition almost of the Maroon situation of an earlier period. And of course, you had after that in 1979, did you not have the movement where the people of Dominica rose up and you know, and got rid of an errant government, of Patrick John, and removed him from office, and set up a structure, the Committee for National Salvation, which in fact created a new government. So it is not there. It's not that the radicalism, I don't believe that's lost. I think that is just, it goes to different periods and is dormant for now until the right conditions have come up, and then, and I hope Mr. Skerritt will find that out very soon. I hope he doesn't. I suppose, are there any policemen here when I can be done for incitement? Lastly, just before I finish, we have attempted to make more permanent our tribute to the Maroons by setting up the 12th of July movement. And there's a movement that we set up every 12th of July. We've done it at the Old Market because the Old Market Square is probably the most famous and important historic public square, public place in Dominica. So every year, and I would encourage people who are interested in that, we can write books, and I think it's the most valuable thing in which I haven't read it yet, Dr. Tremendous amount of work. And congratulations on that. And I'm sure it's very useful to us. It will be very useful to us. But the 12th of July movement is meant to capture the legacy of the Maroons so that it can in fact help our people going forward. And I think that, I hope that in fact after this people might be interested in this 12th of July movement that we set up.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Simon, can we give it over to you?
Yes, indeed. Thompson, mute you so we don't feedback. So I want to thank you. Can everyone hear me loud and clear? I think you have quite a captivating audience on with you in Dominica, and we want to thank them for their contribution. But I also think what we're seeing is the need for more of these conversations and more of a need to engage with audiences. And I think the important question is, where do we go from here? So I hope there's plans, maybe Thompson, for part 2 of this book, a continuation, maybe some seminars. I heard the idea of putting it into cartoon form so the kids will have a better understanding. So I think we have our work cut out for us with regards to this book. But I want to take our audience. We have quite an impressive audience, both with you in Dominica and right here on Facebook. So let's see what Facebook is saying. Abraham says, hey, Thompson, got your book. And then Gabriel, I think I saw your hands up earlier, so I'll come to you in just a minute. Nesta Phillip, great to see you. Henrietta James, congratulations. Dr. Wiseman from the East, from Florida with love. Miss Roye, great to see you. She says, congratulations. So we have quite an audience with us right here on Facebook. Didi Esther, congratulations. Dr. Fontaine, Patricia Fontaine, congrats to him. That's just the beginning. There will be many more books to be written by him. Clyde Gregoire, all the best, Dr. Thompson Fontaine. And congratulations, you have great respect for your people of Dominica by launching your book in Dominica, unlike your oppressor who have no respect for the Dominican soil and its people. So let's take some comments from folks we may not have heard from yet. Mr. Gordon Henderson, the legendary Kadas Lipso King himself, is with us, and he says Henry Shillingford is brilliant. Sheehan Shanna Robin, congratulations. Julie Polidor, great to see you. Let's see who else we have. Pam Clark is up late in the UK with us, and she says, thank you, Dr. Fontaine. Give thanks to our ancestors for their bravery, resistance, resilience, and dignity. Let's take just a couple more, and then we will come over to you, Mr. Gabriel Christian. Steve Joseph, great work, Doc. Alma Daru, quite fascinating. Thank you for that. Rosalind Several, listening from New York, congratulations. Veronica Pascal, thank you, Simone, for your work. Thank you for that. Julia Joseph, interesting stuff. Elaine Vidal, congrats. So quite a few complimentary comments coming in. Maria Francis is here with us, Gina Cassell, Hermelina Watson. I'm late to the party, just received my book today, also sent one to my daughter that was born in Florida, but I wanted her to know my history. Thank you, Doc. Adelaide Paul, great to see you. Powerful stories of fortitude. Thank you for that, Adelaide. Sandra Norris, very good question. Avril Bertrand, where are the students' attendance should have been extra credit assignments, community service points. Sad such an opportunity is being missed by our students. So thank you everyone for your comments. Cheryl Scotland Gordon, this book should be recommended as one of the reading material for history students. Real UT, the national anthem only glorifies hills, valleys, and mountains, nothing to do with human struggles of Dominica. They kept the history away from the people, and it was systematic. Keep Dominicans unaware and ignorant. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions to the discussion. Emma Daniel, perhaps you should go to the schools and the college. Susan George, Doc from Grand Fork, congratulations. Kanita George, great to see you. Last name man, great to see you. So lots of wonderful comments coming in on the Facebook Live, and we want to thank you for being here and for your participation. Mr. Gabriel Christian, I believe you wanted to chime in.
Thank you very much, Sister Dr. Simone Mathieu, real doctor. You earned it. I just wanted to, I think it was our Sister Popo, one of the members of Dala, who made the point about, and I think the teacher from the St. Mary's Academy. So we are all creatures of our time. So in Dominica, the socialization that we knew in our time, the time when people like Bernard Wilshire returned, thank you, Bernard. And also, I want to salute our brother Henry Shillingford, who gave an outstanding analysis of Dominica as an island of Mauinage. We had this engagement. Our intercourse was very dynamic. We had the St. Gerard's Hall, where we had debate and panel discussions. We had the Daubini Debating Society. We had the Goodwill Parish Hall, which was a university for debate and panel discussions. I remember, during the independence period, when I met people like Bernard Wilshire, I was 14, 15. So we were at grammar school, SMA, sixth form college. What is the engagement now? Well, every campaign that this one-party state government does is a carnivalesque type of Mama Guy session where you have loud, garish music, people are shouting at you, and nothing really meaningful is discussed. They shout at you until your voices are hoarse. So we need to get to an engagement where we can be engaged across the table, a panel discussion, different views, and with these phones, we can do these short interviews with old people over 50 who remember that time when we had democracy in Dominica, where people were not afraid to speak their minds, where people could freely debate, and students would not be afraid that they would not get a scholarship or they would not get a job in the dung economy where there are very few jobs if they attended an event such as we're having tonight. It's not by accident that there are so few young people, because we're now in a culture of oppression of freedom of association, freedom of thought, and so you have people now who are in their 50s and 60s, people who have gray hair or, as in my case, no hair at all, at this event when, as the teacher from the SMA said, they should be flooding the halls. So that spirit of intellectual inquiry that Dr. Fontaine has instigated and incited this evening, and all the others who came, I just want to compliment you for it. And that is what we have to do. We have to go to the schools, get back to an engagement of debate, get back to a culture of panel discussions. Let's use these smartphones in a smart way, not to look at idle stuff and gossip, but to use it as a tool for educating and to have discussions on the book that came out this evening, and to have discussions on our history, and to be really people of fortitude and dignity and intelligence, because that's what we are. We're highly intelligent, highly dignified people, and we want to manifest that among our young people.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Gabriel. And Thompson, if it's okay with you, since we have the floor, I would just like our panel who joined us on this program give a 2-minute final comments before we send it back over to you, Thompson, to wind down the program. But before we do, I see Tazi Didier says, congratulations, Dr. Fontaine. Pascal is here. Good work, Peter George. It is sad that the kids in Dominica have no knowledge of the past. I started reading the book and got trapped. Great to hear. Henry Sango, great work. Peter George, Adelaide Paul, I know where you get that fighting spirit. On the front line of the Balas struggle was the woman. Yes, indeed. Cheryl Rowe, will autograph copies be available? So again, let's just give everyone on the panel 2 minutes to provide some final comments. And then Thompson, we will come over to you to wind down the program. Dr. Andre, you want to jump in? I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Simone, for an excellent job. Thank Dr. Fontaine for a wonderful presentation. Obviously, Henry Shillingford, always eloquent. Bernard Wiltshire, who's been in the struggle for decades and still has not lost a step in terms of his advocacy and his eloquence. And I thank the members of the panel. This is a day the Lord has made. We have to be glad and rejoice, because in the midst of adversity, in the midst of difficulty, the fighting spirit continues. But what is different between then and now is that we are confronting mirrors of our own selves. We are fighting the devil within us. And this is why the fighting or the struggle for equality and good governance is so important at this juncture, because no longer can we look at an external enemy and point fingers at them as being our oppressors. We're looking at the dark underside of our very own existence. And so, Dr. Fontaine, you give us strength, you give us hope, you give us joy, and the lesson will not be lost on those who are listening tonight and those who are privileged to be present in the building this evening. So once again, congratulations, and I thank you, and I say good night to one and all. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Andre. Final thoughts?
Me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I just want everyone to know this is amazing. Thompson was my history teacher in third form SMA. I don't know if Thompson remembers this, but I mean, he was teaching a curriculum that was whitewashed, not by his own doing. And I think in writing this book, Thompson has redeemed himself and shown us how to free ourselves of this toxic curriculum that has some degree of mental slavery. Our fight continues. This needs to be a full form documentary. We talked about animation books, but I think it should be put in the form of documentary that not only for Dominica, but that goes on the international circuit. Let's do it. Luta continua. God bless you, Dr. Fontaine.
Yes, thank you for that. So, Dr. Fontaine, we're going to come over to you for your closing remarks as we wind the program down. But before we do, Peter George remind us that there's a woman in the book named Adelaide. So that's where she gets her fighting spirit from. Avril, our future Dominican president, Justice Irving Andre. Okay, Dr. Andre, that one is for you. And Niambi Martin John is with us. She says, consciousness begins in the home. If parents are failing to pass on our history, if advocacy and Black pride are not part of the fabric of the home, then the society cannot ever see a fighting spirit in its people. Stories of Black power movement and social justice and consciousness was in my home. Let us take responsibility for shaping our children, and perhaps they will have the skills to fight the down pressers. Niambi, my former classmate, I could not have wind down the comments with a better comment. So thank you for that. So Dr. Fontaine, over to you. And again, we thank everyone who joined us live on Facebook as well as the radio and the YouTube. And again, I am Simone Matthew. It has been a pleasure being your host. Oh, and I forgot my other host. Sam George, you're so quiet in the background. Thank you for all the technical expertise. Unmute your mic and say good evening to the audience. I think you're muted.
Yes, my apologies. The guy who likes to be in the background, so
yes.
It's okay. No offense taken. But yes, definitely it was a pleasure to be back here doing this again with all of you gentlemen and lady. And of course, thank you to the audience, everyone who joined us. We appreciate you. So I will say again, go and buy the book. Dr. Fontaine gave you all quite a bit, but still, by the time you go home, you'll probably forget anyway. So go buy the book so you have it with you. And there's more work to do, essentially. There's more work to do. So thank you again.
And we look forward to being the platform to help to bring those to the audience.
Definitely. I do have one other thing to say. I want to thank the This Week in Interview audience, because this is usually their night between 8 and 9 p.m. And of course, I want to thank the host, Anthony Drago, for being gracious enough to let us steal his time. So thank you again, my brother. And we will see you all again next time when we have something like this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Thompson, over to you for your final words.
Dr. Andre, Dr. Dangavel, and Sam, and Simone. And let me thank all of you. I promised I would not go past 8:30, but people have been asking about the book. The book has been accepted in practically every major establishment or booksellers across the globe. So if you're in Australia, you can get it locally in Australia, in Denmark, locally in Denmark, across Europe, So it is all over. Barnes and Nobles, even Target sells the Maroons of Dominica. So it's available, you can get it. Second announcement I want to make is to thank all of you for coming. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you did not get a copy of the book, we have ordered a lot more. We're also going to make it available in the bookstores. But for now, if you want a copy, just let me know. We'll get your name and your contact number. And when the book comes in, we will make sure you get the copy. So thank you, all of you. But before you leave, okay, it's not over as yet. I'm inviting all of you for some refreshments and something to eat. So you've been good. It is at Ma Bass's guest house on 44 Fields Lane. So it's just down the road there. If you can come and get something to eat, then I'd be very happy, and we can continue the conversation. All right, so thanks and good night, and thank you for coming. And see you in a few minutes.
All right, Sam. We're gonna